My name is Jane Cohen, and I lead what we call our people-centered work at the International Energy Agency. And the work that we do is really about making sure that in addition to the modeling and the technology and all the forecasting and the wires and the steel that all go into energy, that at the end of the day, energy policy is really focused on people and on benefiting people and on improving their lives. And I think this session now on remote and rural communities really exemplifies why we need to make sure that we're keeping people at the center of the work that we do. All of us here, I think, probably know that rural and remote communities have different energy needs than other communities. And it's important that policymakers understand the dynamics, and not every community is the same, of course, but understand that there are different dynamics that are impacting these communities, and that solutions for one community might not be the same for the next. Obviously, now we're in the context of the energy crisis, and that's having huge issues on household bills for communities around the world. But even in normal times, electricity generation for consumers residing on islands can cost 10 times more than for those in mainland areas. And they're often disproportionately dependent on diesel generators, so a different kind of context. Transportation, for example, oftentimes people living in more remote or rural communities are dependent on private vehicles for transportation. They don't have access to public transportation. And yet, something like an EV, which could save on costs, that upfront cost may be completely out of reach. And then there's also the infrastructure for charging, which likely wouldn't oftentimes is the last thing to be built out in a rural community. And affordability, of course, underpins much of this discussion. Something that I think we try to underscore in our program is that access and affordability are really two different things. And even when communities have access to electricity, it doesn't mean that that access is affordable or that electricity is affordable. And one statistic that I think is really important to keep in mind is some recent work that we did at the IEA indicated that of the 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa who that around 40% would be unable to afford basic electricity services if they had access to it. So it's not just giving access, it's making sure that affordability is really top of mind for policymakers. And especially because a lot of these remote and rural communities may also be low-income communities. So we have compounding issues that need to be addressed. Now we're at the efficiency conference, so let's also make sure that we're keeping efficiency central to the discussion. And as we know, efficiency can really help on costs, and can be an important component of making energy more affordable for remote and rural communities. Over their lifetime, purchasing efficient appliances can save up to 40% in the combined purchasing and energy costs as compared to inefficient ones. And inefficient air conditioners, for example, can use half of the energy of less efficient ones, which is really significant in terms of the cost. But it's really important that programs are targeted so that people who have less means are able to afford those more efficient appliances. And there's good examples that exist. So Mexico, and we're lucky to have Mexico on our panel today. Over 1 million rural homes have been equipped with efficient biomass stoves. In Canada, the federal government's Greener Homes Initiative is supporting a large-scale home retrofit programs that focus on energy efficiency, including dedicated support for Indigenous communities to improve housing conditions and reduce energy costs. And so, we do see that there are programs out there, but they need to be scaled up. And in addition, this kind of idea of making sure that when these programs are designed, they're designed with these particular communities in mind is especially important. And I'll just say, in a previous session, we were talking about affordability more generally, and noting that in the current context of the energy crisis, we've been tracking affordability policies that have been put in place to help consumers. And of 140 policies that we've tracked, only a quarter of them, one in four, a little bit more than a quarter, are targeted. So it really shows that, this kind of concept of understanding what those dynamics are and making sure that those who need them most are really getting those benefits. We still have a ways to go. So this discussion today, I think, is really important to understand what solutions are out there already. What are some good examples of things that have been effective? How there can be better targeting for populations, and how to better connect energy access with efficient technologies. And as I said, how to scale programs that have been shown to work well. So I'm very excited to learn. This is an area I think we want to, at the IEA, we want to do more work in this area. We want to understand ourselves more of these dynamics around remote and rural communities and how to ensure access and affordable access and reliable access as well. So I'm really looking forward to learning from our keynote speakers and our panelists today. And I hope that you all will too. And let me also just mention, we don't have the biggest group here in our audience, but I think this is an issue that I personally feel very passionate about. And I think, just because we don't have a huge numbers doesn't mean that, we're not going to have a huge, really important conversation. So with that, let me call our first speaker to the stage. So I'm going to ask, where are you going? There you are. I said I was going to work hard to not butcher your name. So we have Miss Gwen Healy Ekerrock. How did I do? Not great. Okay, our minister responsible for Kulik Energy Corporation in Nunavut to come up and give some remarks.
Unisakut, good afternoon. Thank you, Jane, and thank you to the good folks of Montreal for making us all feel so welcome here. I'm Gwen Healy Akayaro, and I come from Iqaluit in Nunavut. I'm the member of the Legislative Assembly for the riding of Iqaluit Managayak, and I serve as the minister responsible for Kuluk Energy, which is Nunavut's public utility. I want to thank the organizers at the International Energy Agency for including a Nunavut voice in a conversation on rural and remote regions. It's not every day that we in the Arctic get a seat at this table, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I also want to acknowledge my fellow women in science, technology, engineering, and math, because I see you, and I'm grateful for you as well. I just want to start actually with a small story from home, and if the IT folks could be so kind as to put up that slide for me. Thank you so much. So last June, so a year ago, we had a late season snowstorm in Iqaluit. It was the kind of storm that everybody loves to talk about over coffee and like, oh, the snow, and oh man, can you believe it? And people are gonna keep talking about it for years. But as it usually does in such circumstances, our power went out. And I have two teenage daughters, and the youngest one had just started making crepes, like crêpes, like pancakes. And if you have teenagers at all and happen to have one in the middle of a recipe when the power goes out, you understand the stakes involved. Yes, I see nods. So it was stressful for the teens. Anyhow, we have a kudluk. This is a kudluk in the photograph here in our family. It's an Inuit oil lamp, and it sits in our dining room. It's over 100 years old, and we use it in our family both to keep this practice, this tradition alive, but also for practical reasons. And so in this case, with the power out, we cooked the crepes over the kudluk. And so my daughter finished cooking over the flame. And watching her do that, I was reminded that the khudlaq's not just a lamp. It's an incredibly efficient thermal energy system that Inuit developed and perfected over thousands of years. It runs on a very small amount of oil. It produces steady heat, controllable heat, and it sustained families across the Arctic for generation upon generation. And it's engineering. It's optimization for maximum output, minimum input environment, long before that was something cool to say. And it's a practice that's still alive today in my kitchen. And I share that story because when we're talking about energy efficiency and remote regions, the conversation often starts from a deficit. You know, what our communities lack. We don't have grid connections, we don't have economies of scale, we have limited infrastructure, and those gaps are very real for us. In Nunavut, energy isn't abstract, it's not optional. It heats our homes in the Arctic, in the cold. It runs our health centers and our schools. And when the power goes out in the winter, it affects our communities very quickly. It's a very quick domino effect. But efficiency in our Arctic context didn't start with diesel-generated electricity or smart meters. It started with Inuit science and careful observation of materials, of climate, of needs, and that's refined over millennia into systems built for almost zero waste, because survival required it. And many of the principles that this conference cares about and is elevating this week is about design fit for local conditions and knowledge held and passed within community. And these are things which have already been practiced in our communities. They just weren't called policy yet. So as we talk about rural and remote communities and regions on this panel and throughout the remainder of the conference, I'd just like to ask us to think about how rural and remote regions are not just tough cases for solutions that have been designed elsewhere, but as places that have generated their own working models of efficiency, and in some cases for far longer than the field of energy efficiency has formally existed. And these can be harnessed. So I'll just close with where Nunavut is taking that today, very briefly. We're replacing our first generation power plants in several communities with builds specifically designed to integrate renewables once they come online. We're still working on that. We're advancing this by harnessing the power of scalable, modular, hybrid design. And we're working to advance a new energy strategy for Nunavut with our colleagues across our territory. We have an Ikayukti program, which brings elders directly into the work, first by providing free LED bulbs to elders and seniors across the whole territory, and second, by sharing knowledge about energy use and conservation with them so that they can lead for the generation coming up behind them. And so in closing, I want to share that the khudlaq taught us about efficiency by necessity. And the work ahead of us is about building efficiency by design on that same foundation. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing what our panelists have to say. Huyandami, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That was very thought-provoking. I think what you said at the end there about energy efficiency for by necessity versus by design is very interesting, and also the point that there's so much knowledge and expertise that's already been developed, and just I think a lot for us to think about there. So thank you. And even though you're not on the panel, and I would say that to our next speaker too, please feel free to jump into the discussion and add your voice to what's being talked about. So now I'm going to ask our second speaker to come up, and that's Mr. Victor Hugo Ventura Ruiz, the Minister of Mines and Energy from Guatemala.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to send my message in Spanish. En Guatemala, el tema de acceso a la electricidad es un reto muy grande. Comento, hace más o menos 25 años se hizo una reforma en la industria eléctrica y se destinaron fondos de la privatización para la electrificación y luego se pensaba que los mecanismos de mercado iban a hacer posible llegar a la electrificación universal. Finalmente ese mecanismo no se cumplió. La expansión de la red no es rentable y nos quedan a nosotros en Guatemala 2 millones de habitantes, alrededor de 400,000 familias sin electricidad. Ese es nuestro gran reto, el reto de nuestro presidente, el doctor Arévalo, de lograr la universalización. Guatemala es un país interesante. Hay 4 pueblos, los pueblos mayas que pueden estar compuestos por alrededor de 15 etnias, 15 dialectos. Adicionalmente, la población afrodescendiente. Hay un tercer pueblo indígena que se llama Xinca y los ladinos. Esa es la situación de Guatemala y luego una topografía muy complicada. Podemos encontrar 2 poblaciones en línea recta, quizá a 2 kilómetros, pero por la topografía pueden ser 2 o 3 horas de camino y nos encontramos con diferente dialecto. Es complicada la situación. El reto es realmente muy importante. Sabemos que la extensión de líneas es una parte de la solución, pero la otra parte es muy caro seguir extendiendo líneas. Entonces pensamos que quizá podemos llegar a la población extendiendo líneas y llegando al 95-97%. Va a quedar un 3-4% aislado. Es ahí donde está el principal desafío al cual estamos llegando con soluciones aisladas, estamos llegando también con microredes y sobre todo con la organización de la sociedad de los pueblos. Ellos tienen que ser parte de la solución, ellos tienen que ser parte de la administración, ellos tienen que ser parte de la eficiencia. Es decir, todo proyecto de electrificación tiene que tener medidores. La población tiene que saber lo que está consumiendo, la mejor forma de consumirlo y también tienen que pagar por ese servicio. Y ese es el gran desafío. Pero es un desafío, pero también es muy bueno ver los resultados. Hemos visto a la misma población, por ejemplo, obtener recursos y aunque ustedes no lo crean, en lugares remotos hay bancos de baterías soportando las microredes y bancos de baterías que la misma población ha conseguido financiamiento para obtener ese recurso. Otro tema importante, y ahí la cooperación con países vecinos es muy importante. En la frontera con México tenemos 11 puntos donde la empresa eléctrica mexicana extendió su red y le sirve a poblaciones guatemaltecas. Y ahí también estamos buscando la eficiencia. tienen ellos que tener un servicio eficiente y eventualmente van a independizarse como una cooperativa de electrificación rural, si así les interesa, o bien conectarse a la red. Otro gran desafío, y eso que es lo más complicado, es las paradojas. Por ejemplo, en el departamento, Guatemala está dividido por departamentos. El departamento que produce la mayor hidroelectricidad, el departamento que es la potencia energética, es el departamento con menor acceso a la electricidad. Esa es una inequidad que no debe existir nunca más, y ese es precisamente uno de los temas que queremos reducir y desaparecer y electrificar completamente al país. Otro desafío, y es que firmamos en Guatemala un tratado con el organismo internacional del trabajo, es el convenio 169, y los proyectos de desarrollo, no solo energéticos, tienen que ser consultados para obtener el licenciamiento social con las comunidades. Cuesta, pero lo estamos haciendo. Es decir, los futuros proyectos energéticos tendrán que tener el licenciamiento social, y los que no lo obtuvieron, pues habrá que buscar el mecanismo para lograr efectivamente pagar por los efectos no compensados. Entonces es todo un desafío el acceso a la energía moderna, el acceso a la electricidad y sobre todo la eficiencia energética como parte de la gestión para la electrificación de las comunidades remotas y alejadas. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Minister. And just it is very interesting to hear some of the context that Guatemala is dealing with, and in particular, I found it very striking that the area that has the most access to, or that produces the most hydropower, is the one with the least access to electricity. So I think that just shows a lot of the issues that we're talking about today. But the other thing that you mentioned that I want to pick up on is working with communities and finding solutions with communities. And I think that's also something that, you know, when we talk about our people-centered work, that's very much part of what it is working with communities to help find solutions, or to use, you know, to scale up knowledge that's already there, or to find solutions that can benefit them in the best way. So I was very happy to see you mention that. So now we're going to move on to our panel discussion. So I'm going to ask our panelists to come to the stage one by one. So we're going to start with Sheila Aparacha, who's the director of the International Network on Gender and Sustainable Energy, otherwise known as Energia. Sheila, thank you. And then we have Lila Porras, who's the general director of the Secretary of Energy for Mexico. Chris Henderson, the founding executive director of Indigenous Clean Energy from Canada. Nina Campbell, the global energy lead of Consumers International. And Charlene Gale, the executive chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition in Canada. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
So I'm really pleased to have this group of panelists here. I think all who have different perspectives, but working on the same kinds of issues, and all who have been working in the space for a really long time. So I think it'll be interesting to hear what folks have to say. So I'm going to ask each of you just to, before you answer the question, just to say a little bit about the organization that you're working for, even if it's the government, just to sort of a few of the priorities, and then to get into the question. So Sheila, we know that Energia has worked really extensively to integrate gender considerations into policies in rural and remote communities. Could you share some examples of how energy efficiency programs or other kinds of programs in these contexts really reflect what women in those areas really need?
Thank you. You asked that I say something a little bit about Energia.
Energia, yeah.
It's an international network that was founded at the backdrop of the Beijing Platform for Action in 1975. You might remember that the Beijing was when our member states and the international community agreed that women's empowerment and gender mainstreaming gender mainstream was an important strategy for achieving gender equality and women's empowerment issues, and that this needed to be integrated into all sectors, and Energia was established as a platform for doing this in developing countries, particularly in the energy sector in developing countries, and legitimizing that gender issues were a key concern in the energy sector at that time. So since then, we have grown, and yes, we have worked in many areas, but our main focus has been in rural and remote communities. So to respond to your question, I would like to use some of our experience currently ongoing that comes from Nepal, Madhya province, which is one of the poorer regions in Nepal, where we are implementing a program together with the Nepal Electricity Authority. And it's not many times that you hear of programs on women's economic empowerment that are focusing on grid. Most of them on off-grid experience. So some of the things that we learned start from what you had said, Jane, earlier, but are really fundamental. The first thing was to recognize that rural communities are not homogeneous, and they're not always altruistic, that you have a different and sometimes competing interest. There's a big difference with, for instance, how close you are from the transformer in rural communities. There's a difference between whether you are legally registered or not, as to whether or not you can access some of the energy efficient appliances and services. So I think that was really an eye-opener in working with our utilities and with ourselves. Another thing was changing our own mindset. This program was funded both by the Norwegian Embassy as well as the Asian Development Bank. And we incorporate certain frameworks that we use to interventions. And a lot of them position our communities, and this was said earlier on by one of our speakers, by the keynote speaker, that we tend to position a lot of the communities and groups that we serve as beneficiaries, as target groups. This is language that is set within the frameworks that we use for our reporting and accountability. So really changing that mindset, even if we come from a civil society organization, was really important. And here we really borrowed from the business sector, really viewing our groups as clients and as customers and as consumers. As well, and I really appreciated the comments that were made earlier on in the Global Commission about consumers. So that was one, and if you do that, then you start thinking again using a business approach, is what are the challenges from your different market segments or your different clients? What do they value most, and what are their main barriers? Also recognizing that they have been living, and particularly if you're coming from one of our emerging countries, and you recognize that communities have been living with their challenges for a long time. They've been coping, and they also know, how to solve their own problems. So it shouldn't be a top-down, but rather a bottom-up approach that you undertake. Another thing was really engaging communities. We were working with, we specifically focused on women, and here it was really community awareness, but also not only for the benefits for understanding the issues and also sharing what some of the benefits could be for energy efficiency, but also breaking down resistance for some of the interventions that we wanted to use. So really using local champions, using women leaders themselves to promote some of the work that we wanted to do. but also addressing other issues such as electrical safety, time saving was a big issue as well. Theft of electricity, hooking was a very big issue. And also just simply how do you manage and pay your electricity bills? These are all part of energy efficiency. I'm going to wrap up, maybe just two last ones, is also very important to us is how important it is to focus on livelihoods and economic benefits in order to drive energy efficient solutions. But that in doing so, you have to move beyond some of the challenges, look at the broader ecosystem, and I'll talk a bit more about that, in order for women to be able to engage economically and be empowered economically in order to be able to access some of these solutions. So it was not just taking an energy efficiency approach, electricity access, but also looking at an economic empowerment approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And I think it's, I appreciate all of that because it's not just, going into a community and saying this is what needs to happen, but it's everything else that you just mentioned. And I think the client shift is so important and interesting. And, I'd be curious kind of what others think about that. And it would be interesting to hear, Sheila, a little bit more from you about how that's kind of shifted your engagement. But for now, we're going to move on to Layla. So Layla, what have been the key priorities for the energy ministry when designing energy efficiency policies aimed at addressing the needs of remote and rural communities in Mexico?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jane. Thanks also to the IAEA staff and to Canada for the organization and hospitality. It has been a great experience to be here and to share with colleagues very interesting experiences in different fields. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit in a broader sense, and I would like to emphasize that for Mexico, energy efficiency is, of course, energy security, and that a more efficient energy system is one that it is more resilient, but also more affordable and better prepared to external shocks. And it protects households from energy price volatility, so then mainly rural and poor communities, and reinforces national energy security. This understanding has shaped Mexico's new vision for the energy sector through the new energy legislations that we adopted last year. The country has placed energy justice, so we are fighting against energy poverty, sustainability, and long-term energy security at the center of the national policy, energy policy. And this vision is also reflected in the historic expansion of Mexico's electricity system. Mexico has embarked on a plan of adding 32 gigawatts of new generation capacity by 2030, and with around, we are expecting 70% of our renewable energy coming from renewable sources. So that could help us to achieve almost 40% of clean electricity generation by 2030. This represents one of the largest investments in clean electricity infrastructure in our country's history and demonstrates that energy security and sustainability can advance hand by hand. Coming back now to your question, more specific, but I wanted to give a broad vision of what we are doing in Mexico. But let's focus on the remote and rural communities. One of our main priorities today has been to ensure that energy transition reaches every region in the country. Mexico is characterized, as you know, by an enormous geographical, climatic, and cultural diversity, including indigenous peoples and communities living sometimes in very isolated areas with very different energy needs that you were talking about at the beginning. For this reason, we have learned that energy efficiency policies cannot be designed using a one-size-fits-all approach. Instead, the priority of Mexico's government today is to develop solutions that respond to local realities while ensuring access to reliable and affordable and sustainable energy services. Our second priority has been to place the communities at the center of the policy design. Technology alone, we are convinced, is not enough. Lasting solutions require dialogue with local participation and an understanding of the social, cultural, and economic characteristics of each community. So finally, we have learned that institutional coordination is essential. In this way, SENER, so the Minister of Energy, works together with CONUE, which is the National Commission of Energy Efficiency. The Director General is here also giving some conferences today, with the CFE, so the Federal Electricity Commission, with the state and with the local governments, as well as with the indigenous communities. All this to integrate energy efficiency into broader strategies that improve energy access and strengthens local development and contribute to more inclusive energy transition.
Thank you so much, Leila. And what you said, it made me think of what Sheila said, in the sense that there's all of this different coordination in these different ministries that actually really need to come together to have a successful project. And it's what Sheila was saying about the economic development for those communities as well. It's like the more it's very cross-cutting, actually, and the more that can be acknowledged and the more that there can be that kind of coordination and working together between ministries, I think the more effective the projects will be. So now I'm going to move over to Chris. Chris, we often focus on the technical side of energy efficiency, but we know that these programs can also play a role in building skills and leadership locally. So based on your experience, what types of energy efficiency initiatives in remote indigenous communities have been most effective, for example, through training, mentorship, or community-led approaches? And if you can talk a little bit about indigenous clean energy.
Great, Jane.
That'd be good.
First of all, Indigenous Clean Energy, the acronym is ICE, but I want to let you know that we're the good ICE.
I didn't use your acronym in the introduction for a reason.
Yeah. The remarkable story, or a series of stories, hundreds of stories, thousands of stories, that have involved in this place that we call Turtle Island, is that Indigenous communities now own or co-own, or have a defined financial interest, with almost 25% of Canada's electricity generating infrastructure, almost all renewable transmission or storage. But in that story, it's been assertive of sovereignty, very much community rights, very much what both Leila and Isabel talked about. And so the story is about by us, for us, and with us. And that with us is with partners, private sector partners, government partners, utility partners. And we made remarkable progress in the area of renewable energy, but in the area of energy efficiency, we have not. So our work in the last 5 years and what's been happening across Turtle Island in hundreds of communities is really ensuring that it is affirming a family, so it's at the home. And we don't talk about it as energy efficiency. Our language is healthy energy housing. Energy efficiency, sometimes even I who work in this space don't know what it means. But healthy is good, energy is good, and housing is good. So that's where we go. And in that space, where we're working on is that there are about 78 projects that have occurred that have helped indigenous homes become more energy efficient. But to your question, Jane, is that the approach that we're now taking is we're doing an accelerated approach for community level. It's not one home at a time. It's most of the homes in the community. And so therefore, we have trained people at the community level, often young people who are the champions in the community, or we call stewards. And in hundreds of communities across Canada, they're then leading doing the energy audits, identifying what's needed to happen, what the cost is going to happen, and are very much focused on the multiple benefits that you want to result from it. And number one, the health benefits. A healthy home that's energy efficient, that has good indoor air quality, has huge benefits. There's an affordability benefit, there's a climate benefit, a climate resilience benefit. And in that space, you also improve the quality of that healthy energy home. So the Bring It Home Project Accelerator, I'll refer a bit more as we go along here. There are these communities leading these projects where there may be 700 homes in a community, but 200 homes are going through deep energy retrofits, with every home requiring $40,000 to $70,000 worth of retrofit to be a home for the next 3-4 generations that's healthy, safe, affordable, and climate resilient. So that's the approach that we're taking, but it's also locally led, where there's locally led leadership, locally at employment, and this asserts the Indigenous sovereignty that Indigenous communities need. And let's remember, there are a lot of rural and remote communities across Canada. As Gwen would know, there are 250 communities that are not connected to the grid, that are remote, and I'll talk about one of those later. But there's also another 900 communities that are rural, and so therefore the rural and remote reality for energy and energy efficiency is where we're living in right now, and where we want healthy energy housing.
Chris, something that you just said kind of struck my mind, which is that, these houses are being retrofitted for, the next, 3 or 4 generations. And, I don't know that much about Indigenous communities, but something that I think about is a lot of times with homes, people move a lot, or they're not, home means something different to different people. And so what does it mean when you know that you're doing it not just for your own family today, but for the next generation and the next generation? It's just, it's a different dynamic. And I think goes to this point of, all of these contexts are different. We, in the wonky energy world, we're not thinking about it in that way. We're not thinking this is a home for this family for the next 100 years. We're thinking, how can we get in and out and get this done in a way? So it's just an interesting way to kind of think about it. So Nina, so you're the global energy lead for Consumers International, but you are from New Zealand, so speaking with both of those hats on, considering that New Zealand has achieved near universal electricity access, which includes remote and rural areas, what key policy lessons do you think have helped reach these communities? And have Indigenous perspectives, as far as you know, been integrated into this process?
Thanks, Jane. So I'm representing Consumers International today, and we are the membership organization globally for consumer rights organizations around the world. So for us, it's about empowering individual households as consumers to use their market power to influence equity and affordability, particularly in the clean energy transition. And we are very excited about the transition in all the potential that it holds to be more inclusive and more affordable energy system than the present one. So absolutely behind that. But yes, I also in a previous role worked for the Ministry of Energy in New Zealand, so and the Energy Efficiency Authority, so can share a little bit of the experience from New Zealand too. So we have technically 100% energy access, electricity access in New Zealand. But that said, so we sort of pat ourselves on the back for that, but the reality on the ground is that in rural communities, there are still many households who are living without energy access, electricity access at all, or with very poor and unreliable service. And no one more than the community organisations working in those rural places understand the reality of that. Certainly from a government perspective, the awareness of how to engage with that is quite low. But when I speak to our members in New Zealand who are working at the rural level, they give some very sort of troubling examples of what some families are living with. And it's very much connected to poverty. So yes, there's an element about being dislocated, disconnected sort of geographically, but very much a poverty issue. What we see is that actually energy efficiency is not a relevant conversation to have with a lot of those communities, that actually they don't have some of the basic structures in place like decent housing, or yes, even electricity access. So for an example of what that looks like, one of our members called Sustainability Options is working with a family right now who live just 20 minutes outside of a small town called Tauranga, which is again about 2 or 3 hours from a large city centre, so not actually huge distances that we're talking about. But there's family there that they're working with. They're a Māori family, so an Indigenous family, living on tribal land with the wider whānau or family on that property. But they have no electricity connection. They're relying on a small PV panel. connected to a car battery to run some basic appliances like lights and a sleep apnea machine, so some really critical medical equipment. They're running a gas cooker using LPG bottles. They have hot water, but through a wood-fired external hot water heating system. No space heating at all, and cooling food with ice. So this sort of family, we can't show up with an energy efficiency solution for them. Actually, the fundamental things have to be done first, so fixing holes in roofs, closing up broken windows, and energy efficiency is really a long way down the track for them. So we do have so the work of sustainability options that I mentioned is really powerful in that space, but the main barrier that they have to overcome is really trust. And they do amazing work in building relationships with communities in those rural and impoverished communities. And the way that they go about it is really, first of all, to build relationships. So to be there physically in person, present, is absolutely critical to that. And again, that's a piece that government programs really struggle to offer. So working with community organisations like them is really key to the impact that we're able to have with government programs or community-led programs. So showing up in person, identifying who the sort of people with the correct authority in the Indigenous community are to speak to provide, to build that trust and enable them to take messages of what the solutions might be to their people, and also to co-create those solutions based on the existing knowledge that already exists in those communities and what they need. So this sort of relational, journey-based program delivery has been key to the success there. So showing up in person, speaking to the right people, but then also going on that journey with the family, sort of fixing the most urgent things first, not necessarily coming with our kind of cookie-cutter solution first, and then that provides a sort of gateway to other government programs. Like we do have a Community Renewable Energy Fund, which is providing funding for solar and batteries for remote locations. And actually there the objective is around building resilience to climate impacts that are most strongly felt in rural regions too. So yeah, so lots of examples to share on that, but I'll pause there for now.
Thanks, Nina. And when you were talking about the building trust, and Sheila said this as well about kind of identifying who in the community is, or who has the trust of the community, and really understanding that. And we've done a lot of workshops at the IEA on this kind of topic, and that building trust always comes up, and it's government is not able, that it's not the role of government exactly, but also government is very bad at it traditionally, and yet it is, I think, one of the biggest keys to working with communities is having that trust. So I'm glad that you have mentioned it, and I think it's something that we'll come back to too. Now, Charlene, so considering the energy projects in remote communities in Canada, combining clean energy solutions with efficiency improvements, from your experience, could you share examples of initiatives that have delivered strong results in practice and what's made them effective?
Yeah, thank you for having me today. I'm Charlene Gale. I'm the Executive Chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, and I'm the former chief of the Fort Nelson First Nation, served 15 years on council, and happy to have 2 years off in non-political field. And my life has just been very, let's just say, spending a lot more time with my family and just getting out on the land. It's really neat to see all the commonalities that we have in the work that we're doing, no matter where we live. But I do have to say, Nina, that you really hit me hard when you talked about some of the challenges with the communities that you work with, and how fortunate we are as Indigenous people to live in such this vast territory and to have all the abundance that we do have. Just when you talked about some of the challenges, like I was camping on the land for last week and was cooling my food by ice, and we all know that it's really challenging to get that and to create energy. And in the mountains while we were there, I was gathering snow just to fill up my coolers, because in a couple hours, like, it depletes really fast, right? So that was really humbling, and thank you for that. So the coalition, what it is we have 200 members across Canada, and some of you don't know that there's about over 600 nations in Turtle Island. And so what we do is we really enhance the well-being of our members and protecting their environment, protecting their vibrant cultures and languages, while supporting them to have equity ownership in projects that are over 100 million. In order to reach energy efficiency and to build these projects, we are going to have to cross Indigenous lands. So it's really important that our people are involved in these processes. So some of the things that we do is we provide legal advice, because in their communities, we don't have the capacity to make informed decisions at the speed of business when it comes to wanting to develop these projects. We provide business negotiation and commercial structuring support. These are put together by the community. These practices really incorporate their Indigenous laws and their values. And we help with regulatory navigation. As you see, the government has announced Bill C5, which is to fast track projects. And, just talking with the government, talking to communities, I think that there's a misunderstanding that when they say they're going to build the project within a year, it's actually all the consultation and the consent that has to happen up right front. And then the 1 year mark starts for the government, as I learned to understand last week from the Major Projects Office. But we also provide environmental stewardship kits. And one of the work that I'm really proud that we do is Spirit of the Land. And it's a cultural rights toolkit. You can find all our material on our website on FNMPC. We do a lot of tools and resources and publications on capital markets, environment. There's many documents on there that I'd love to share with you guys. Another thing is policy advocacy and helping First Nations get before government and industry, and just to have a conversation. But really, we're really member focused, and ensuring that how we move forward is led by our communities. I'm really proud to say that a majority of our projects, 85% of them, are in the electricity transition. And with that, it represents $4.27 billion worth of capital investment. And a lot of these projects, you're seeing that the First Nations have 50 or 51% ownership. I'm really proud to say for my community that we're looking at doing a geothermal facility. There's been a lot of challenges on the way. Just even talking to my friend Chris here and the incredible work that he has done. These projects are not built overnight. I attended many community meetings and information sessions with my members, and these projects can take several years to decades. And that's something that we want to change. Just getting into your question, if you can remind me, is the energy efficiency of these major projects?
Yeah, some examples of projects that have come to fruition and been effective, or anything else that you want to say, Charlene?
So what I would say is I'll just talk a little bit about my own community, because I think that's really important in the work that I've been able to do. Energy efficiency is really important to me because we live in a remote community, northeast corner of British Columbia, and we are rich in fossil fuels, but the development of those fossil fuels haven't always impacted our community with our own source revenue. So we're looking at ways to change that. And we had an oil and gas well that served our nation for 70 years. And our people were highly invested in working in the oil and gas patch. And, there was a new technology that came out that was fracking. And we were used to conventional drilling where that was at the pace of our people. And so when fracking came in, it was opening up our territory in a vast amounts in a very short period of time. We were seeing impacts to our lands, our waters, people coming from all over to hunt, and we really rely on that for substance. So what happened is, with climate change and some of the policies that happened, we were one of the biggest polluters in Fort Nelson. So we ended up having to shut down some of the industry. Not us personally, but industry had to shut down because they couldn't keep up with the demands. And so what you're seeing in Treaty 8 territory is a lot of the gas is coming out of the Fort St. John area because it's wet gas and we're high in sulfur content. And so the Fort Nelson gas plant was like the biggest taxpayer because of this. So right now our local gas plant has been shut down. I actually worked there for 20 years and learned a lot through, working in the corporate sector. But going back to my territory, the one main well that supplied fuel for over 70 years has now been depleted. And there's many others that, could be activated later on, and if we can figure out, how to produce it with low carbon technology, like acid gas reinjection. But so what we were able to do is we're looking at repurposing this so that it serves the next 7 generations. And that's one thing that we really take pride in, is like whatever we do, whatever we get involved in, we're always thinking of the next 7 generations and what are we going to leave behind. Because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that our people are able to fish, hunt, trap, and drink fresh water off their lands, be able to access our grocery store, we call it, but in a good way. So with this project, we were able to get a $40 million grant to do the initial stages on it. And we're finding some pretty cool information out of it. We're working with some of the different universities. There is an opportunity for maybe lithium coming out of here that could be extracted from the gas and the water. But the other thing is, which is really important, because the cost of food is so expensive in the north. I'm really lucky in Fort Nelson, but as you go more north into the Yukon and Northwest Territories, which is just in our backyard, like we're all cousins, borders separated us. You can get a pack of water, it might cost you $24 up to $60 the further you go. The cost of meat just to have a steak is like $45 in my community. I've seen like steaks be like $100 as you move more forward north. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is greenhouses. And so we're looking at building 100 greenhouses. And just talking to Chris when I came in here, he was like, what are you going to grow? And I was like, anything. And one of the things that we have an advantage of is we're right next door to the land of the midnight sun, the Yukon. So we only have a short period of darkness in the summertime. And over the winter, this local farmer who heats his greenhouse with wood stove, he went and bought a little banana plant. And by summer, he had this big, huge banana tree. And he cut down all the bananas and brought it to the local farmer market to really open up people's minds, to show them that the possibilities are real. Like, we can grow anything here, right? So that was really neat to be able to see. And yeah, I really look forward to this project, because by being able to generate our own energy, we can power our whole community. We can power the whole industrial field, and also send power to Alberta, which is 2 hours away, because we're not connected to the grid of Site C, which is in Fort St. John, about 4 hours south of us.
It's really interesting, Charlene. I like the the image of the 100 greenhouses and the banana tree growing up. Well, so going back to you, Sheila, for a second. So, Chris, I think, was the one who mentioned the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. And also, I think, Chris, I'll also just say energy efficiency, you're right. It's like a hard, like, what does it really mean? And I like how you mentioned that. But, when we talk about the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, one of the things we talk about is economic development. And so, Sheila, I wanted to go back to something that you said, which was, building, economic benefits into these projects. And you're talking specifically about working with women, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that, either in the example in Nepal or in a different one, just how you've kind of gone about that, the trust building as well. How has that gone forward in your experience in an effective way?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Um, so, one of the things that we have found, we've all been, I think all of us have talked about um, energy efficiency in homes. When we talk about rural communities, we're talking about households. But one of the opportunities in rural communities is that a lot of their businesses and productive uses are in the same place where they're at home. So they don't take a vehicle and go to the work. But actually, one of the opportunities we have found is that business takes place in the home. So in order for you to facilitate and scale up energy efficiency in homes, having this economic empowerment approach and building on the businesses that women have, we have found to be a critical intervention. A very important approach. Aside from just the whole fact that we feel that in order for women to experience other rights, political rights, social rights, really the economic rights is very important, and to access services. So how have we gone about that? One is I think really key is to take an ecosystems approach, because we found that there are different aspects and issues that affect women's, that allow women to be economically empowered. For example, one of the things that we do is to focus on business development services and support. So this is not just thinking about the energy technology, but what are the other challenges that will enable you to actually build a business to be able to afford the energy technology. So business skills is really critical. We do find in the communities that we work with in Asia and Africa that women are running markets. If anyone has been to some of our countries, you find in the local markets it's really women that are present. Like I said, in their homes, they're running their own businesses, they have farms, etc. So building on that. But running that as a good business practice is different from a survival activity. So that's one. Another is just access to finance, not only in terms of financial literacy, so that you don't get indebted, but actually getting affordable finance that is suitable to the women is another. Positioning women in markets is also has also been another intervention that we've had to work with. That indeed, if you're going to grow your businesses, you need to not just look at your local markets, but you need to grow that. And in doing that, also thinking about safety options. You talked about mobility, and so not just how women are able to move from one place to the other, but how they do that safely. Entering certain communities might not be safe for some of our women. Digital access is really important. This was a key learning from the COVID times, that if you're not connected digitally, and the digital divide really affects a woman's ability to engage economically. I think the last two lessons that I'd like to share are one about ownership. This was something that came from from the previous, one of the previous sessions that we spoke on, that someone talked about local ownership. That really, is your intervention allowing women to actually own energy access, energy efficient appliances, or just be users of them? Makes a very big difference, and that goes to, for instance, registering businesses, and women's ability to actually access other resources that are provided by governments and other things. Then the last one is also about leadership, and this is going beyond just individual leadership, really to collective leadership. We've found that when you organize women collectively and facilitates their capacity to engage with the markets, but also to engage in the policy space and decision-making spaces. That really makes a difference. And then, Jane, maybe just the last thing I'd like to do is to come back to something you said, and I think that was about building trust in governments. I don't know if I heard you correctly, but that's not necessarily the work of governments to build trust. I think maybe if I heard it wrong, I want to completely disagree with
Well,
that.
okay,
But
it should. I agree that it should be, but I mean the person who's like doing the policy, like it's a weird chain. But yes,
yeah,
I think
so,
you and I are probably
well, just
thinking
from a
the same
civil
way.
society
Yes.
perspective, for me, that's the first thing that governments need to do. They are elected, and then they represent their constituencies, and the first thing is about building that trust. So also, again, in our interventions, one thing we've worked with local communities is putting in place, really advocating for this understanding that governments do have this responsibility. It's a public good. You do have this responsibility to build trust and to deliver services. But on the other hand, also, what are the safeguards that need to be put in place so that communities can, if you have a complaint structure, if you want to really address, if you want to bring that to governments, that you are protected. So that's another key area of work that we think is important. Thank
Yes.
you.
Well, Sheila, I absolutely agree with you. And let me say, what I meant by that more was, I think, to the point that Nina was making about the, local organization that was, working with that community, that working for government, working with groups that have that trust, that have that local context, that is really, I think, where government can do best. Obviously, we want government to be building trust, but I think understanding that local groups that are working with communities may have the best context and can help kind of funnel the resources and funnel the kind of cultural understanding is I think can be effective. But take your point, and I'll be more careful
and
about
there
my words.
I fully agree with you.
Yes.
I just think amongst our government leaders, we should not say that that's not their
You're right.
responsibility.
Well, let's keep that between. Let's keep that in this room. Let's keep that in this room. Did not mean it like that. Are we live streaming this? Okay. Well, speaking of government, Lila, don't worry, we won't put you on the spot for that. So you've spoken about, the priority work of the energy ministry in Mexico, and obviously, you're doing so much on this. And I was just wondering if you could share some examples of policies or initiatives that you've already undertaken in remote and rural communities, and if you have any key results to share.
Yes, thank you, Jane. And talking about building trust for the government, which is so important, as you said, we are convinced in Mexico that great benefits, we can get great benefits when we integrate broader national policies with local development. If we don't have that, we cannot build trust. For this reason, our approach in Mexico combines regulatory instruments, targeted public programs, and coordinated implementation of the national, federal, regional, and local government. One important component is the establishment of the minimum energy performance standards and the mandatory energy labels, which encourage the adoption of efficient appliances and equipment throughout the country. These measures allows households to reduce electricity consumption while generating long-term savings regardless of where they live. So this is very important. But at the local level, institutions across the energy sector have promoted different initiatives, such as the modernization of the public lighting systems, improvements in the municipal water pumping systems, and the dissemination of efficient cooking technologies through the Mexican official standard for good stoves. And this morning I was talking about this very important program that President Sheinbaum launched last year, about replacing the efficient wood-burning cookstoves because we have these traditional open-fire wood stoves, which are very bad for the health, for the climate change, but mostly for women who are the most affected. And in Mexico, we're talking about women who are the most affected in rural communities, which happen to be indigenous and the poorest in the country. So of course, we are attacking a very important problem with one solution, which is these efficient wood burning cookstoves. So these initiatives have been particularly valuable, as I said, in these rural and indigenous communities, and especially in areas where access to modern cooking solutions and energy infrastructure remains very limited. In such context, improved cookstoves can serve as a transitional measure to reduce fuel consumption and also the indoor air pollution, while broader energy access solutions are deployed. So at the same time, the government of Mexico remains committed to reducing the energy poverty through the expansion of access to modern energy services. A key example also is the integrated approach of the Universal Electricity Service Fund, what we call the FESUE, which has expanded the electricity access in very remote and highly marginalized communities through the deployment of the distribution of the photovoltaic systems. So as part of these efforts, Mexico aims to increase the electricity access coverage to 99.99%. Now we are in the 98%, which is not bad, but we want really to go until, if possible, 100%, but we know that it's always like 99.99%. By 2030, we want to expand installed renewable electricity generation capacity dedicated to reduce the energy poverty from 0 in 2024 to more than 180 megawatts by 2030. So these projects demonstrate that expanding access to electricity and improving energy efficiency should go hand by hand. So we are incorporating efficient lighting, appliances, and equipment in communities that require electricity. More recently, another program that the Minister of Energy launched is the rooftops, solar rooftops, which is called Techos Solares para el Bienestar program, which is in the Mexicali. You know what we have a problem in Mexico is to connect in all the grid. So sometimes we have problems really in the two peninsulas of Mexico. So this is in the north. This program already began in Mexicali, in Baja California, so one of the peninsulas, and we are expanding this to other states in the north of the country. Because these regions experience very, very high, extremely higher summer temperatures, which significantly increase the electricity consumption and the energy expenditures for households. Through the installation of the rooftops photovoltaic systems in vulnerable households, the program helps families to generate their own electricity and to save money in the periods of peak demand. So these are two very important initiatives. Well, I have more, I think that already took time, so thank you.
Well, just to say, the ministry is really doing a lot, and it's very inspiring to hear all the different kinds of programs and that coordinated approach that you mentioned before. So, Chris, back over to you, and we don't have that much time, but I do want to hear from everyone on the panel again, or from here. So, Chris, going back to the trust building, you know, what you've been working obviously for a long time in this, and based on your experience, what are some of the key lessons for ensuring that the communities that you're working with really are involved in, you know, shaping and implementing these programs?
Thanks, Jane. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, the community sovereignty has to be expressed. So our programs with Indigenous Clean Energy, the Good Ice, really builds capacity in a very intensive way. If you look at one of our programs called 2020 Catalyst, which is now in its 10th year, we train 20 people a year. It's like an executive MBA on energy. We have another program called the Bringing It Home Project Accelerator, another program that takes a year. It's a year-long program with both residential and non-residential and actual tactile learning at the community level. When you build it with that deep capacity, both by individuals who are leading projects, often young people, with community leadership, then you affect the change. But what I would say in the communities that we've got, and if I put you as an eagle, I could take you from coast to coast to coast, Atlantic, Pacific, Arctic. You see hundreds of communities doing this. Now what we're doing it at scale. So it's whole home, the whole home of energy and energy efficiency, the whole community, and then the whole package of change and financing. And so now what we found is we needed to both have the community inside, we needed to have the team that's going to take it forward with governance support, but then you had to have the financing packages that make it work. So in a community like Pikwakanagan, which is north of Ottawa, a rural community 3 hours away, they're doing 50 homes. It's about a $5 million project to make those wholly retrofitted. But there we're bundling together government grant funding, which is about 30% of the total, so that's non-repayable, with commercial financing, with philanthropic support, with carbon financing, with healthcare savings and cost savings. So the combination of the three things that really make this work is a combination of community engagement, that governance leadership, that is whole community, the whole team that's going to take it forward with the whole package of financing. And all of you have been very generous with your gift of time, so what I would offer back is that anybody who wants to know what's happening here in Canada in projects, energy efficiency and renewables, we have a lot of resources, we give it away freely, and we'd be good to do that, and I'd love to give those gifts back to all of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And obviously, all of our panelists have a lot of experience, as does, I'm sure, everyone listening as well. So would encourage folks to talk and learn from each other after the session as well. But let me go back to you. So in your role at Consumers International, you interface with, I think you said 200 different members from around the world. And so I'm wondering, what are those members saying about energy efficiency in their more remote and rural communities? And is it something that they find to be something that people are asking for, that they want? Are there effective ways to work with communities that they're finding to kind of help with awareness about it? What are you hearing from your members about it?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jane. So yeah, we do have a huge membership across 115 countries. So we've got a lot of different experiences and cultural contexts to think about across that portfolio. I guess in the context of rural opportunities, I mean, definitely what we hear is that the primary concern for people in rural contexts is really to have a reliable and resilient energy supply. And I think that's sort of the number one challenge for a lot of our members, or the number one problem that our members are trying to help communities solve. So the sort of instinct, I think, is to go towards renewable energy as the solution for that. So there's a lot of interest in rooftop solar opportunities, and we're seeing really huge appetite for programs that are rolling that out, and there's a lot of support coming through from various governments for those kinds of programs in New Zealand as well, but in emerging economies very much so. But so what we're trying to do is also talk about sort of the bigger package of opportunities that there are to make better use of that renewable energy capacity that is being installed at the local level. So energy efficiency is a conversation that we always introduce, and yeah, there's not always a great understanding about what the opportunity is in energy efficiency in a lot of those contexts. So that's a lot of what the work of our members are doing. We've got a one-stop shop program which is trying to fill that gap around consumer information and understanding about all of the clean energy opportunities, but in particular energy efficiency, where there is a real gap. And I think it does come back to being able to talk about energy efficiency in terms of the household level benefits that it can deliver, in terms of bringing your costs down further, making your renewable energy system go further. But we've got some great examples of projects that have been focused on energy efficiency. For example, in Indonesia, so one of our members is the Vulnerable Consumers Association. And they've been doing work going out into rural communities with efficient cook stove solutions. So there, oftentimes, there's not necessarily an electricity connection. People would typically be running wood stoves on LPG bottles. not necessarily a clean or healthy way to run cook stoves. And they found some real success looking for communities that were using not just family cooking services, but actually sort of at the industrial and economic productivity level. So, for example, they've found communities that are working on palm sugar production, using their cook stoves all day long, and using a huge amount of LPG for that, not efficient technology. And they've been able to roll out efficient wood biomass-based cook stoves in those communities. And it definitely took a lot of community engagement, finding the right people who had leadership in the community to first engage with where were the best applications for this technology, and to identify the palm sugar producers as an opportunity for that, and then to test. It was really important to pilot that technology in just one or two homes to make sure that and adapt the technology to that exact application and the nature of the environments that they were doing that work in. But then, having piloted it and seen success and made the tweaks necessary to make it work, to be able to roll that out to 300 production facilities in 4 different villages that were really focused on that activity. And I think experiences like that are helping to share the story of energy efficiency. Yeah.
Thanks, Nina. And you and I have talked some about this, what you just mentioned, the kind of awareness, needing to raise awareness and work with consumers on kind of information and understanding what's out there and what efficiency can do. And I think that's true across, all contexts, actually. But Charlene, I'm wondering, in the communities that you're working with, how much efficiency is kind of in the conversation and top of mind for people?
So I'll kind of just talk from my perspective and experience as a chief, because energy efficiency has always been important to us. In 2023, we received a community award for the efficiency work that we did within our households. And we filled out 150 applications and replaced many of the furnaces within our communities. One thing that many of you may know or may not know is that our people were pushed off the land and forced to these small reservations. And when the government came in, they promised all these things. And we didn't get any of those things until, 40 years later, when they came back and they set up a small little village 2 kilometers from Fort Nelson. And when they did, they built 14 houses. And our 14 families moved into these houses, and they were small square footage, like I'd say probably about 600 square feet, very small accommodations for families up to 17. My grandparents had 13 children, so 15 with mom and dad, and boxed into these small little houses that had no insulation. And we have one of those humble homes when you drive into our community, so it's a reminder of where we came from. But I do have to say, with the projects that communities are building and having ownership in these renewable projects, whether that's solar, geothermal, wind farms, some nations are getting into critical mineral mining and also LNG, and huge transmission lines where these projects cross over many different communities, and they're working together because they're linear projects to make it happen, which I think, is something that Europe can really learn, because our territory is the size of Switzerland. And hearing Brian talk about, all the finance ministers and everyone just setting up their own little power instruments here and there, when you could learn a lot from us and how we do our business and how we live our lives and how we collaborate. But just going back to our humble homes, we then moved to a new reserve, which, we had 3-bedroom homes with basements. These were built in the 1960s. And so some of the programming that I'm seeing from the federal government, there was an announcement from the minister about the Canadian Greener Home Affordability Program. And those programs are working for our members. And it makes me really proud to see elders that have been living in their homes for 40 years and not having the efficiency that they need, basements unfinished, getting the new skirting that they need, new insulation, new windows, new furnaces, and even for our school, we have a private school on reserve. It's been in operation over 40 years. We are open to the public and bus non-Indigenous kids to our nation, and we run a daycare, the only daycare within Fort Nelson, and we have non-Indigenous people dropping off their babies to our community to be looked after. So we have solar on the roof, and our kids are involved in all these processes. We have a greenhouse right on the school, and they're leading these projects for us. I know that a few of our youth went through Chris's program and learned a lot and brought a lot of those teachings and are in our schools and sharing their knowledge with our young ones. So we're seeing these programs work, but I think what is most instrumentational is that when we have the ability to have our own projects and make our own source revenue, we have the ability to build our own homes. And so we're building smarter homes, more efficient homes. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is because we really cherish our elders. They have guided us. They have looked after us for many generations and passed on their knowledge and built our community to what it is today. So we're very fortunate that we can build elder homes and we allow elders to move in there free of charge. We have over 100 elders within the Fort Nelson First Nation that live all over the world. Some are on limited income, but one thing that we do offer is to pay for their heating, because no matter where you are, we want to ensure that our elders are going to be looked after and they're going to be warm. We're able to give them honorarium. And so what I'm seeing is, because we don't have collateral, people can't just go out and build their homes on the reserve normally, but they actually can if the band is willing to give them a loan. What happens is they actually go to CIBC, but we guarantee the loan for them, which is no different than how we're building in projects in Canada. And the First Nation Major Projects Coalition really advocated for the Indigenous loan guarantee through the federal government. So we're seeing a lot of change in ways that First Nations are involved. We're partners now in projects. And, from partners, we're going to be owners. And I look forward to the future because there's a lot of great projects and work that Indigenous communities are doing right now. You look at Chief Skydeer, the Mohawk, how they just announced their project. Now they're selling power to even New York. But I think that if our communities are lifted up and given the resources to build up our capacity, and for people and government, industry to come to our territories and just listen and build that trust, the possibilities are endless. And I feel like, Chris said it, if we're left to our own devices and, you build partnerships with us and don't come to our territories and think you're going to do everything for us, then it's just not going to work. So we've come a long way, and I'm just really proud of our elders and our youth and our members, what we've been able to build those partnerships with Canada through our treaties.
Well, Charlene, I feel like this is a very positive note to conclude our panel on. I think, Anna, are we out of time? Yes. Okay. We're out of time. But I think that was a very kind of hopeful message, Charlene, and it's when you said, you're really proud of being able to see these houses that were built and being able to, see the improvements in the home. I think that's, it's very meaningful to be able to kind of see this in the bigger picture and to see that progress over time. So thank you for sharing that with us. I wish we could give everybody one last thing, but I think, but Anna's saying no. So
Go check out our websites.
Yeah, check out the websites. I think this was really thank you so much to our panelists and to our opening speakers. This was really interesting, and I think really kind of gets to that deeper level of the conversation that we often want to have that is very hard in some of these panels. So thank you to all of you, and looking forward to continuing discussing with each of you and for you as well. Thank you for coming and listening. So thank you.
Thank you. you.
Great.